I remembered I was keeping watch on the old mansion. There she was, in her black skirt in the flesh, smiling in the present before my eyes. Skin white, pale. She turned, gleamed. Perfect form, short hair curled, honeycomb, just as in the picture of Vera Miles I had seen all around. The transmigration of the sea dissolved. The tree appeared in a canvas at the window. Strings from above it lowered it down. The curtain in front. It was a play, an act, a drama. In the window, in the entrance, that revealed a two-way mirror. Blind I was before, the observer. I, I tried to watch the picture, the professor, the beam with which I experimented, the projector camera on which I was working, back as a model, a statue turned around, back, sideways. I was writing in longhand, as I had no ability to keep up typing in the observation tower in which I resided, and contemporaneously watch as I kept watch upon her, and it was here the co-pilot I'd had her brought up through the tunnels of the lighthouse, the tower, which beamed at night. I had a premonition, a feeling that the plane had crashed onto the right, actually. But it was left stage as you looked at it in the mirror. It depended on which side of the mirror you stood and whether you looked out. There was a doctor's scrawl, notes. Here's the notes, here's the scrawl. In their original, her character is in the handwriting. It's maintained a spirit of... Oh, there, yes, look. Wide eyes, white, dilating eyes of movement, thighs. The operation is in here, as she wrote. I got the impression she wrote the details while the operation was taking place. On the X-ray, she'd made these marks. So she'd indicated what was being done, so that we could find... I see. Look, she'd marked the vulva, the internal system, the stem, the DNA. I see, the stream produced up here, the blood. I see. Right, the doctor had made the way through the vaginal walls, up, scratched up. It's like parchment scratched out on the film of the screen of the DNA. This operating room, this surgery I was in. But a moment before, when I looked around, it was just a room, a cell, like a soldier's cell almost. The professor was over there. There were the crosses in the window, the Christ, large, like a circle, like Stations of the Cross, a ring just thrust into this small area. Joan of Arc, Antoinette, all were there. Mary Magdalene, but even I'd see Boadicea. I got the impression this was a tomb, an old crypt I'd entered into, of the traditional Druids. I'd remembered this race. I'd seen some trace of it as I've been tramping through the countryside in my officer's uniform. But I realise now that these crosses, these people, these were old archaeological sites, digs. They were just ruins. Ruins. I thought I must be sitting in a particular flowing energy area, a vein. And when you sat in this area, I noticed that a different wall type came in, a different space-time. And I found that I could hear a sound now, as if there was a change, a construction. There it is. I see they were trying to erect the bars so that I couldn't see with my sight this second other area, these walls, these space-times that came in. The bars would block it, would prevent it, would prevent me hearing voices. Ordinary visionary. I see this room. It's, oh my God, it's what's that sign outside the window? St. Anne's. At St. Anne's. This is a psychiatric hospital. This diary in front of me, this page, the words, it says, end of day 1 of observation. The observation. I see. I turned the page. Blank. Just a blank page. And then the words, nothing. And then a date. 1789. I see. It also said 14th of July. Good Lord. And then I opened the next page. They were sort of stuck together, and it said, woman bewitching was a silver screen goddess beyond compare, but she had others, angels, and they vied for my attention, and I had to see them in the other dimension, the living in heaven, and the living on earth in the present. The halfway house, it was a dimension of our meeting. Audrey, all the others, angels. I had seen the White House that had been depicted in the picture of a cathedral. But this was, I see, this was the room, but it would be a cathedral if one could perceive and conceive. An annex, and it had a small tower, a tower. This is a tower? A small tower, of course, this upper area, the top floor of the tower, of course. A small halfway house annex, white-walled. That was it. Towers. It towers over the landscape. Of course it does. And I remembered the book Louise gave me, another Kafka, The Castle. Of course, it was a tower, and it was there. I saw the angels, Vera, Louise, sisters in soul, who had come to conceive. So that's what it was. The notes went on of this dead folk, this professor. He said it's the soul. I saw Vera on this plane, in this dimension. I saw Audrey, who is living. I saw her smile, her eyes, and we conducted a conversation. I couldn't turn the page as I read this man's work. My fingers were shaking. But here I stood. I see, I tried to look at these notes he'd made against the X-ray in this circular cross area, like an inner church of the inner wheel, and inner Vulgate cycle, and I read back at the pages where they say we worked and wrote. I indulged in this endeavour whilst the others played. I called them horses. They were so playful, my staff, my others, but they were only young and I understood. But as the days and the nights and the time went on, they played sport. They expanded their self-imposed regimens of drinking parties, cocktails, but I worked on in a number of poems. I've left them here. If you can see them, they are written in disguise in French, the old Latin language of French, the original from the ancient Greek. You have to decipher them, the code. Continually, these exercises, games came upon me, and I couldn't put my pen down as I worked and operated, and quickly worked out the DNA symbols and sensors on the bodies which I worked. But I hasten to add, they were not bodies dug up, if you'll forgive my rudimentary expression. They were, wait for it, spirits' DNA that had come to visit me. I tried to work on the DNA of the angels because for some reason, which I cannot explain, they came to me to help them heal again. And that was when the construction units of the army arrived, the pioneering regiments, and the engineering constructed bridges and boarded up my place, my home, in the square in this little town, this little village. And you can see these pictures of Christ and Joan of Arc and Antoinette and Mary Magdalene and all the others. They're against boards nailed up, because on the other side is a construction that the army engineers and their pioneering regiments made as they drilled the holes and closed out my sight. Closed my sight, and I made the tunnel that you came up, that wound up through the trapdoor, and I blindly worked in here, half curfew, and they're coming again. You hear them now, all my life, and that's why I built the rocket, the satellite, the slides, because I knew that with my angels I could get out. Once I resurrected them, and they worked with me, they would lead me out. I could hear them talking to me over and over again each night. The Civil War, they said. And they would say, laughing me impishly, my girls, Richard Marble, DJ. It's a more deft ring, a calling, they would say, an occupation befitting, an inheritance conveyed by thee, Mount Isa mine, the Isabel. We have given you the DNA operation. You have saved our soul. And there is the map, the designate. That's the recipe, the sample, which you must use. For we witches, we 3, 4 are in the magic circle for you. Martians, they call us. And they giggled. One in her tight black dress, and the other white. All races, Aborigine girls, beautiful, matted black hair, brown tanned faces, eyes open with innocence and love. I looked at the Aborigine girl in particular. No malice, no cruelty, no hate in her face, just joy for living. Just joy for living and love. Just joy for the spontaneous everything that we had lost, and I heard them that you could hear them drilling now, and they were pretty soon the banging would start, and they would start nailing up the walls and windows through which the cracks had come. And now you can hear the ambulance. It's coming to get me. It's coming to get me, to take me away from all my experiments and operations for another day of the DNA. You'll have to get him to change the trust. Leave it to us, the family, your father. He left it to who? Who? For the hospital, the cure, for me, with Louise, to administer as a doctor, a professor. DNA, don't you remember? Does it matter? I don't know. I don't know whether it matters at all, but she's your sister, and she's dumb, blind, and deaf, and afflicted with the wounds, these freeland wounds. That's what they're called. That's what I call this new disease. For Emily. That's the reason I did it. Richard Marble. That's what... Schizophrenic. That's the category that they use. I've got to... They are us, I tell you. Half and half. Demigods. It's a civil war. We're fighting ourselves. Status. Like... That's what I heard. I keep my ear to the ground. Companies, they take me far afield. Geoffrey, it's you. You bastard. Geoffrey, you absolute... I don't know how to describe you. You're a genius and you're a monster. You've set up all these companies. You did it to ingratiate yourself to Mother. Emily, as she used to walk up and down as if as in a tomb, and all because of me, because I was trying to do what my calling. I know it sounds corny and phony and stupid for the cynical, but what's honesty? A crime? Silly and stupid, old boy. You see, I could have helped you. I could have offered you my companies, and you're a brilliant lawyer, a good lawyer. I could have made you conveyancing. We could have built up, got the contract for all these jails, bashing up those boards, and the ambulance services, which serves the tenants and the people when they become too ill to go on because there's no light within them. It's self-fulfilling. It's self-perpetuating. A market. It's a brilliant piece of genius, which I've done, and I'm so glad. I'm so grateful to this world for giving me this wonderful time on it. I've had it good, you know. I've had a wonderful time. Well, don't fucking blame me for the bloody Air Force strafing those people in that North African sector. I mean, for God's sake, we had to get rid of the criminal, the man. And if I had to pronounce a death sentence on them and they're innocent, to get at him, the end justifies the means. Don't you understand that, you silly, stupid misfit of a brother of mine who's led everybody, mum and... well, not Dad, but down. A mere hurdle. Jumped over. You see, you've got to understand, David, old boy, young man, I've had enough of you and this carry-on that you do, this stupid, paralysed sort of paralysis. You locked yourself into ideals and good work and goodness, and I hate goodies. Hate them. They make me sick, ill, puke. I'll puke all over you, you sickening goody, the holier than thou, whiter than a lily. Oh, it's a pretense. Oh. A pretense. Oh, look, listen to my builders. They're getting closer. They're getting closer. Well, more money for me. More contracts, more ambulances, more arrests, more criminals, more work for my barristers. Yes, it's perfect. Self-perpetuating. Quick, quick. More arrests, more arrests, more arrests. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Quick, 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 quick. Sirens, I invented them all. I've got this all sewn up right from the top, you know. Geoffrey, the genius. Geoffrey Pringle, the genius, the star, the man who turned the Philspot round and round. Oh, Prime Minister of the world. Don't want it anymore, though. Wretched government. Much happier at the penthouse in my apartment blocks, just chasing the lovely girls around with pulling their knickers down and getting stuck into them, you know. Oh no, they're all about, they're 21 plus, yeah. No, I've never been into that disgusting animalistic behaviour. Don't blame the animals, it's natural for them. Okay, don't hit me, all right. Play the bloody goody, holier than thou, prosecuting, crown prosecutor again, crown again. All I can tell you is that I want to relinquish this obligation, this terrible responsibility. I did this swindle, I'll tell you right now. I did this swindle. I did it deliberately. It was a carbon tax. Started off in Australia, actually, in the farmlands, doing it in the outback, in the, northwest downs, the Fairholme Downs that Mum and Dad left to us. I used the inheritance. I truncated it, really, diverted it. I know Dad and Mum said to use it for good. Well, you've done enough for that in that area. Goody, David. Dave, the goody, Dave the goody. But I put my wealth to good use. I perpetuated the state, the nation state, the emblem, the flag. I did it all while you wasted yourself on Aborigines and fashionable issues. Well, it's a fraud because the image has changed now. It's about the rip-off, the success, not the goody image, the pretense that you use to step up the issues to make a success of yourself. That's all out the window now, you see. I'm through that crucifix. At least I boarded up your windows, didn't I? I ordered the builders to get the workmen, to the foreman, to nail that up with the outside in and the inside out so that you could sit in here and you could fan yourself in a church, an inner area. It's you can see for yourself, it's the inner tomb in the church. This is how churches built themselves, on the ruins. God, David, I gave you an opportunity. This is your brother Geoffrey, your Jekyll and Hyde personality. I enabled you. I gave you an enabling act when I was head of the government, but I hated the government because I couldn't stand I had to take the responsibility. I'd swindled all these people by using this festivity, this nonsense about helping them, and then when I got in and I'd taken all their money through tax, I suddenly found they expected something of me. They expected me to do something, to perform myself. Perform for them, deliver. That's why I put in the back of the Constitution that all these categories, if you slotted people into them, their cases slotted into this or that, they legally got nothing. So it authorised the act, it authorised the decision maker to reject everything out of hand before, secretly. They take the fee, take the money, and the documents just sit in a vault, and then we reject them. Yes, the process letters of rejection done by these machines in your rooms. That's exactly what they're constructed for and why we put them in to substitute robots and automatons for people. Because people think, and occasionally one breaks order. And then we have to get the army in, pull them into line. And you can see what's happened. You can see the final result, the event. We've had to divide the whole world up into sectors, martial law, get rid of everybody and keep just a few geniuses. Geniitis, old boy. Genius, 1 to 10. We've put them in, locked them in, checked them, tested them for DNA. We used the X-ray machines to ferret them out. You know yourself. You were found in a trench. Okay, I'm prepared to concede that you're a genius, but yeah, so am I. But where do you get this genius from? Where do you last? I have this suspicion it's because you're good. It's the DNA. That's why we hate you. I look at you and I shrink back. I put my hand up before you and I hide my eyes behind its back. You make. So I refused to take the responsibility. I legislated against it. I just dictated it. I put it through. I said, this is it. This is all there is to it, whether you like it or not. I've got the backing I've got the army behind me. I must admit, I've had to watch them. A few of them have started to break ranks. They actually won't turn on the people and execute their orders. They like the picture. You see, this is the problem I didn't take into account. I never took into account the fact that people like. They like each other. Now I'm stuck. If there's a change of law in a new government with having to deliver and actually do all these files and give them a result that's fair and reasonable for which they paid. And it's going to bankrupt my corporation, the company. It's going to bankrupt the New World Order, and I can't stand it. It's why we're combing the country, to get the 10 genii we need, the saints, to do all the work, sit at a desk all day and get through this bloody immigration type. Millions of files that have stacked up because we took the fees and promised we'd give them a hearing. Under Lord Denning said you've got to have a fair hearing, and I just... Oh, you hear that noise? Maybe we can shut it all up. The genii are the only one who can process it all, because they've got some amazing ability. Yes, Jeffrey, they like the people. It stopped. They stopped it. I, Detective Sergeant Edmonston, recount the steps of this investigation. I expect no one to believe it. For that reason, I call it the strange case of the brooch of St. Magdalene. The Marquis James Devine had been glimpsed. DJ informed the superintendent he had located the diary as I watched. "Read the letter first," said the superintendent. "A letter from Richard Marble, QC," DJ read. "It is headed. The investigation was reopened by him," the superintendent said. "Go on." "Okay, Superintendent, I'll start. The chemical solution that I used from the serum is reappearing. I am transforming into James and David. I am becoming. The metamorphosis process is setting in, no reverse. The plastic I have concocted since I first came to the house has affected my voice and throat, sound, waves, the reception, and I found the traces. It's given a spoiled yield, which I have used in the experiment. The professor, the soldier, the 10, all of them. Now I found the formula eludes. I fear The patent surfaces of all of them will dissolve, revolve, and reveal. I watch the detectives and you, DJ, through the panel in the wall next to Emily's bed. I can hear the sounds entering the surface of the walls that separate us in time with the swing of her hammock. Emily seems to communicate in a manner that she brought back from the priests when they ordained her a priestess. If I could locate the diary and the map within it and the brooch that she was given, I could find their spirits and plead with them for release and forgiveness from this cave, this cavern, in which she's a princess and looks Egyptian, a mummy. I heard the words, the echoes in the walls of the cells. Mama, Mama, sent a shiver down the back of my throat, spine. If I could relocate the diary, the map within it, it's annexed at the back. It unfolds out. Detective, if you have it. For it is said that they maintain the cure, the priestesses, the princess. The priests and the angels maintain the cure that can extricate my throat, me, from this hell in which it is, in which my voice is, in which I am, for the method is embedded in the skin, in the marrow, in the bones, inculcated. It's a script called conditioning, define and provide. It's a impediment, a little box in my voice box that alternates and controls the back of my cortex and turns my head from right to left in staccato jerks. It's death. The method embedded. The formula, the ancient formula that was secured by the Christ and Magdalene down through the ages and kept by the Celts, according to the legends, to control clowns, robots, automatons, their constitutions, suppress the pattern, operate on one valve, low power, no power. And as I look out the window, that is why they rounded them up. I can see them, the whole world, from this peak, this tower, this pinnacle. Had not the patterns, had no power. The army was slow motion. The triumvirate, the ark, I can see them. They sit up there in the clouds. No power. That's why they've contacted heaven on earth to activate our power. 1 in 10. The memory, the remember, that's what it was called, the process. The cell downstairs at the basement of the bottom of this flat block. It's a little square of bars in the front. I remember coming in. I was brought in, taken in, dragged in, a straggler, and there was shooting and strafing. The Air Force. I remember. I can remember the machine guns. I was taken in. It's like there was a camera following us and recording it all. My back, the detectives, they held me by the arms and they took me into reception. It was the half-light. The dawn was coming up. I thought it happened in the darkness, the semi-dark. The sergeant was behind the desk. I was taken in. I gave ID details of the remember? Hardly any. I couldn't remember anything. I was shot in the temple, in the head. Of course, that's what it was. And I was calling Mama. Mama. An SOS to my mum. Mum. Mama. Death in the atmosphere. That was it. An SOS. An inside job. A inner finger tapped on an SOS. Old key like the Titanic, and I'd tried to go west, and I'd struck the iceberg, in inverted commas, metaphorically and psychologically, because I was sending an SOS automatically. Some capsule cabinet, in a tiny little cabinet, I called it, on the graph in the map that I'd designated and drawn on the wall, indicating an outward expression of everything that was happening inside to us. All these cells, all these competing levels of self, of selves were inside, activated again, right from the child through to the teenage tennis player, then the solicitor. The voice box was jammed again. It was the process of sound that they used, and it was a touch, a catalyst. Whenever I reached a point of which I was embarrassed, subconsciously, I guess, which is what I was trying to do. I was trying to delve into my unconscious, to open up some sort of scab, some closed box in there, and peer in and photograph it with the pictures. That's why I metaphorically called it an inner jet going in. My mind scanned the terrain of everything, the past, present, in my brain, and was trying to open up a little recess and see what was in there. It manifested it in this whole process in symbols, as a quest, as a cure, as a scan, as a inner flight. Freud called it psychosis, but it was physical as well as a closed mental box. It wasn't psychosis, it was healing. And opening that scab that was layered over, it was not, it wasn't hard anymore, but I psychologically imagined my finger pressing on it, and it didn't hurt. So it had become like concrete. It was a concrete scab. Touched it, but it did start to unearth. It was like a swamp that had been concretized, if I can use new terms. I had to organise new terms in the dictionary. That's why when you found the dictionary, you saw that all the sentences had broken up, because they didn't cope. They were like an orchestra where a composer invents a new genre, and the orchestra has to invent new instruments to play it, to express it. That's why the dictionary I used broke up, and I had to institute new words, and that's why the old order crashed. It was inner. It was the collapse of the inner conditioned education that couldn't cope with what I was trying to do and needed to do and find to heal. That's what was going on. That's why there were all these drawings. They were trying to plot a course and show the graph and a diagnosis. I began to wonder. You see, there it is again. I must be getting close, because two sides of my head, my poles, were crossing over and causing the convolution in the crossing over pinnacle point, like a triangle if you drew two lines from one to the other, and that's where on the graph it jumped. Right. All I had to do was unearth this. And that's why I had studied the map and seen that Christ walked our mountains green in ancient times. You remember, Blake? I was trying to understand that it was the poet. The poet in me had the rhythm, and the rhythm was the right, correct, previously suppressed expression that was trying to river and flow, and I felt that this had all been bottled and pent up, and like a volcano was breaking the dam down, and opening, it would flow. There was a pent up stress that needed to be released, needed a controlled release, instead of violence, which would be outwardly expressed and blow up everything to smithereens or attack. You see, that's what had happened. People had to understand that controlled violence in the mind, out of frustration, of everyday frustration, which was just derived from the complete thwarting of their aspiration, because nothing happened. We had a previous United States, we had a Britain, we had a Germany, we had France, we had Russia, we had Australia, we had the Pacific and Japan and China and India and all these people in the Arab nations, and nothing was happening. Everything was stymied. Everything was stunted. No growth. Individuals knew instinctively inside that we had one time on life, and it was all stunted. Their lives meant nothing. Nothing but work, play on the weekend, material things, driving, car, boat, yacht, bank accounts mean nothing, because the approaching die meant a question. What have I done with my life? It was no use being the President of the United States or the Prime Minister of Great Britain and just wandering around not achieving anything, just not being result-driven. Well, that's no use either to the President or the people or the Prime Minister or the himself. Jack London. I remembered as my memory started returning. Jack London. Jack London. It came back like a return SOS. Jack London, Jack London, Jack London. It was glimpsing. It must have been working, because suddenly there was a jam in my voice. It meant that I was getting close, because it was this self-thwarting was coming in again, which meant that I must be getting warm. I must be getting close, because I knew it was my ultimate test. Every time I was about to resolve something or achieve something, in came the self-thwarting. And this time I let it go, bounced it off. Right, I felt as if in my imagination there was a pilot, which was I in miniature, a jet inside my head, returning from having been down in this chasm and having looked at the scab behind the door, found the problem, taken the photographs, Braken. Yes, they'd shot at me. Braken. You see, there's the self-thwarting again. The jet had been in the cavern, and there'd been shots and firing, and the Air Force was strafing. Metaphorically, I was trying to bring myself down. I was trying to kill myself. Locked the jet inside. The scab was closing the door. The concrete. I would be buried in a coffin alive. Inside my head, inside the womb of the psyche of my mind. I screamed and turned the jet around and up and out. Oh, through the tube, the doors banged behind me, but they weren't poisoned anymore. They were pure. I could see that, and I had the photographs of the diagnosis, and out flew the jet. And it seemed in my mind that I flew out of the back of my temple after flying up through a stream, and then out the temple, and out, and got away. Landed safe here again. So here I was in the room, and there was my cold coffee. I took a drink. and picked up where I left off. I saw the professor. Of course, it was I looking into a mirror. Professor, a Pantheon soldier, there he was. Air Force, me, the pilot, they were all I. So I had strafed myself. I had dove on myself. I had attacked myself. I was the rifle bayoneted prisoner, and the prisoners, row after row after row after row after row, all in rectangular mirrors in the cell. They were the constitution of my self's development. It was curious. It meant that I was running a test of myself. Sides of me were testing me. So this little circle in which I was living, in this ring, it was surrounded by pictures and mirrors of other sides of me. For example, the Air Force general, there was one. You remember the general in the beginning? Well, was it episode 1? That he was looking at me, questioning my father's self, and there was my mother. Mama. Yes, they were expecting me to rise to a certain level. And so they should, and they were also looking at me, and they were telling me, you can do it, son, you can do it, you're good, we love you, we love you, we love you from heaven. Yes, that was it. That was it. That was it. That was the map to which I had been led. To Evil Cure, it was called. Evil Cure. Cure this head. This Tsar. King head, which I looked at, decapitated. It stood on a shelf in a cell, a tiny cell behind a screen, and it just looked at me, half eyes closed, as if it was in the Kremlin corridor down which I'd been led to see myself, my alchemical king, cut off, decapitated. The old king and queen of myth and legend had been the old conditioning, dissipated, atrophied. And that's why I studied the map and seen that Christ walked on our mountains green. Blake had influenced, and Jack London. The Iron Heel. Yes, it had crushed my head. Beneath it, ancient times and in pleasant pastures was seen with Magdalene from Worthing, and brought the knowledge of England through Languedoc and Aquitaine before the persecutions, before the E had been crossed out, before the prosecutions in the 1st century. The prosecutions, I'd heard them recently, round and round I'd gone, as if my head had been pinned on a board in a circle, a target, and sent round and round the periphery at 100 miles an hour like a Catherine wheel, a sun, and people had taken pot shots of there it was again, I'm getting close, the ship's getting close, the Titanic's resurrected boat's getting close to the sun. That was it, the prosecutions, they'd thrown darts at my head going round and round before it looked like a stuffed rhinoceros. Poor things in the middle. They'd suffered as well. All gone. The animals slaughtered, murdered, ruined by this terrible government that had, this executive that had, this coup, they'd taken over the mind, my head. They ruled as if at a table across my temple. Adopted, that's right. That was the idea. That was the trick. That was what I, as the surgeon, the professor, was doing. I was removing it. I was slowly disimposing it, taking it off like a bandage that ripped slowly off the skin of my forehead. But it held a program. It was a chip. Yes, there were chips inside this tapestry, this cloth. I imagined it that was around my head, that had been around. Of course, it was the bandages that had been wrapped around my temple where I'd been shot, to heal the breach, to stem the blood. I see what had happened. It had manifested. It had become a scab and twisted my head, my neck, from one side to the other, so I was stuck, crucified, hands, arms outstretched against this window. I was against the board. I was boarded up. The DNA, Anastasia's, had confirmed a match with Franziska Schankowska, a factory worker who... She was Polish nobility, lesser Polish nobility 200 years ago. Right, that's what it says here. There's a profile, right. It's a DNA profile. Right. Ah. So I wonder if the Polish nobility is linked to the German Romanovs. Yeah. On the throne as real Romanovs. Yet Frederick the Great and Saltykov's descendants. Audience, you get that in this lecture? I'm just throwing these things out there. So you've got to ask yourself, because Catherine had lovers and bragged. It's very likely, not much of a test, is it? It just means that it's probably not happened at all. That Saltykov, if he was Catherine's lover, and Catherine the Great, Catherine the Second's child, daughter, son, children, was... Well, German and Russian, if Saltykov was Russian. Slavic. Yeah, Slavic and Teutonic. Well, we'll have to see where the tributary breaks and it becomes, the line becomes all German. I think it's where Catherine... I think you'll find it's where Elizabeth's son, Paul, comes in. Have a look at that. Have a look at the DNA. Yes. There. Okay. Lecture finished for today. That's it. Okay. Come on, class dismissed. File out. Come on, get going. I've got to do some work. I'm the lab technician today. I'm on duty. Yep. Procedural expert lab technician I am today. I've got to get this right, this practice, get a result, because the medical molecular expert is the Professor DNA, the professor in DNA. He's the one who makes the declaration, who draws the conclusion after... He has the power, after considering the DNA result, which I do as the expert in techniques and procedures. The history he considers, that's another category he has to take into account. He draws on the expert witness testimony and evidence of history experts in this area, in Russian Revolution and Russian history, aristocratic history, ancestral history. Is he an aristocrat, the history expert? No. Is he an ancestor? No, nor is the professor. But, as you know, his DNA, quote, very nearly matched, unquote, the body we found in the ditch. Alleged, well, hoped to be the Tsar, so we can close this case. But it may as well be the Professor DNA, because he said that it's proved that unrelated people, in his case, in this test case, an unrelated person had very nearly the same DNA as the other. That is, the supposed Tsar, the body found. So somebody unrelated can match 99%, well, very nearly, what's that mean, 99.9%, can very nearly match another person. So it just proves nothing. It proves the person's not him, or is him. Ridiculous, isn't it? Or is related. So that means if there's an absolute match, you might have a person who's unrelated, and yet they might have been related previously in a previous century through DNA, through crossovers and connections in families way back. And that's why it shows up as a match, or it simply proves that unrelated people can have a common match. But that's a conclusion that has to be drawn by the professor. Under the Act, he has the power, he has delegated the power by the minister to make the decision and take into account the history of the situation, the DNA result based on techniques worked out by the lab technician, that is me today, and also forensics. So all this taken into account adds up to a percentage conclusion the professor has to draw. So if he says that there's a match, he means that he's taken into account all these matters, and the odds are pointing to a sort of a 1 in trillions and millions chance of it not being the case, or being the case, you know what I mean, as it were. So the professor has the power under the statute. Right. I designated and made the techniques to get the result, but I must confess, I must admit that where it comes, I've put the cart before the horse, because the medicinal, molecular, we'll have to introduce a new word called molecular. The neck DNA, it must mean. But I have to confess that my narrow knowledge is confined to working the DNA machine. I'm a machinist. I'm not an expert in DNA at all, really. Just techniques to work the machine to get a result. So I admit that I have no knowledge, Your Honour. Sir, I have no knowledge. I have no knowledge of medicinal, molecular clusters and forms and inner DNA patterns. I simply do not understand their significance. So I've derived it back. I've worked out procedures that will give a match or not give a match by doubling over clones, and that's why I was able to do this. But I wouldn't have the slightest idea, really, the significance of whether, when there's a match, whether it's unlikely that, or whether they're unrelated. I wouldn't have any knowledge of that. I have no idea the significance of it. I mean, it's the professor who knows that. I just give the match. It's a match, I say. Look, that line matches with that line. But the significance, I have no knowledge whatsoever of that, and you'll have to look to the professor, and he has the power under the Act to draw the conclusion by taking in the DNA knowledge, which obviously is that someone can be unrelated and also be a match. I didn't take that into account. I just said it's a match, so she's the other person. But it now appears, or it's concluded, that it can not be the other person or not related because unrelated people can match. So I was wrong when I said that I had no power to say it anyway. Were you an expert in that area? You've just confessed that you're just a technician. You have no expert knowledge in the substantial molecular information required and needed to make assessments in this area and final conclusions, have you? No, sir. No, sir. Then it could just as easily be that they were not related, notwithstanding they matched. Well, no, my techniques say, no. My techniques say that they are, yes, but you're presuming that a match means the person's DNA you put in is the other person's DNA and therefore related. But you have already, it's been proved that unrelated persons can very nearly match. And 100% is history and forensics and odds, and therefore what history is involved? But you don't have any power to take into account history because it's not your decision. It's the professors under the Act. If you made a conclusion that they are related, your decision's ultra-virus. You don't have the power because you're not an expert and therefore not a person qualified to be a decision maker under the Act, because the power can only be designated to a person who is properly entitled and has the expert qualifications to cover all aspects, namely DNA, history and forensics. And that is the professor, not the technician, machinist working the machine with his guidelines and limited knowledge, limited to procedures. I rest my case. The declaration is null and void. The Home Office declaration is null and void. It has to be set aside. There has to be a review. Thank you, Your Honour, Sir, Lord of the previous administration, Freeland before the war. Thank you. Justice will be served. Suddenly got up the top of the hill. Tanks were driving past. Democracy. It's democracy. It's clogged up. It's just talk, yak forever. All the bills are watered down. Nothing gets through and nothing's done. Nothing has force. Nothing has effect. In autocracy, the person was the problem, not the system, because a single person could just decree and it would be done. But it was the person. If you had a murderer, he just murdered everybody, rounded up the Jews, killed 6 millions, 12 millions, etc. But what was the use of that? Uh-oh, here came another tank. Oh, another tank was coming down the road. And suddenly I realised that it's the person, the calibre of the person that's a problem. This popularity of democracy is rubbish. There's nothing about that. It's a system that will work. Get cause and effect. Get things done and get a result. If you had a idealistic, wonderful, decent man as president or king and he had an autocratic system, things would play out. There would be bills passed and laws for the working class, and all of us, everyone, we're all working class. We're all workers. And then I realised that it was that Prime Minister who'd fooled everybody in the democracy by telling lies about the reason we were going to do it. And now I realise the reason we were going to do it is because no one would put it through if we told the truth, because it was clogged up as a democracy, and that PM knew it. War. That was what caused the war I'd woken up in my flat and found the notes. The underground notes. That was it.